Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, here we are at the end of a month, and we're waiting on getting some of the new long-range data. So let's do a quick review of what we've just recently had. And we're going to do that by splitting the month up into halves. On the left-hand side, you've got November 1st through the 15th looking at total precipitation ranks by climate district. And we remember what sent the Carolinas up into Virginia over to very wet conditions. A lot of it had to do with Tropical Storm Eta. Remember, Eta went right in through like this and then cut along the coast. It met up with the stationary boundary that was sitting right here, kind of lined up with the Appalachian Mountains. And we had several days of very, very heavy rain because of that. So that's why when I take those drawings up there, you see such wet conditions here for the first half of the month. Now, it was very dry back to the west of here. And as we then transition to the second half of the month, the pattern that helped get things drier in the south actually pushed over here to parts of the Appalachian Mountains in the Carolinas, getting up into Virginia. And we finished the month over on a drier note. Well, that is until today. I'm going to talk to you about what's coming through on the 30th. Now, thinking about that, let's just look back over the last 7 days. A lot of the precipitation that we are going to be getting is coming out of this region right in through here. There was a low that kind of took off and is moving through parts of the south central United States to the lower Mississippi River Valley over the weekend. And it's now going to emerge here in the Appalachian Mountains and then curl up into parts of the Ohio Valley up toward the Great Lake Basin over there on at least on the east side of it. Now that particular setup, you can see how much moisture this is drawn into the Gulf Coast. So what we're expecting to see out of this today is quite a bit more precipitation. I'm going to talk to you about that in just a few moments. First, though, let's do the same analysis with temperatures. Doesn't matter which part of the month you look at. Overall, we have favored above average temperatures or very close to average. It's not to say that there hasn't been shots at cooler air coming over to the Carolinas, but they've been brief. Nothing's really stuck around for several days in a row. So when we put this month together, it's going to show up wet because of the way the beginning of the month shaped out. But the end of it, you can see here, continued with the first half's warmer conditions. So let's keep all that in mind as we think about how we're going to transition into December and then eventually through the rest of winter when we get that new long-range weather forecast data, which will be featured in next week's video. All right, behind this big winter storm that's going here into the Ohio Valley, there's quite a bit of cold air. So we're going to be bringing frosty temperatures all the way down to the Gulf Coast and even into Florida. I'll show you that in a few minutes. But until all that cold air gets here, we've got a lot of warmth and very windy conditions on the southern side of this low. So the color shading you see there through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, all that is high wind advisory. And we're going to have strong, what we call synoptic scale winds. Those are the broad scale winds that are just orbiting around the deeper low that's going to be pulling through this area. We're also going to be seeing some thunderstorm winds as well, as we expect to see stronger thunderstorms throughout the day today. Now, when we look at the upper level flow, take a look at this. The jet stream is screaming across the Pacific, and then it gets really bunched up into one ridge here, a second ridge there, a third ridge here over the Canadian Maritimes, and then a fourth up here toward Greenland. Now, in between each one, there are troughs. And the trough that I'm most interested in is the one that meets up with the subtropical component of the jet stream. You see, coming off of the Pacific, the flow splits right here. And that is actually going to be critical to the pattern after this deep low pressure system gets out of our way. I'll talk about that in a moment. But with a jet streak here and a jet streak here, we're going to be seeing rapid development of a low pressure center in that area. But that low pressure center is going to actually get stacked. In other words, the upper level low will be sitting right on top of the surface low, which means it's going to take a few days to get out of the way here in the northeast. And so we need to see what that means in terms of our precipitation patterns this week. And is there anything following this we need to be paying attention to? Because right now, this will be the mainstay of our weather discussion at the beginning of this week. This deep low forming right here. The strong winds, the severe weather, that's our main focus to get things started. Okay, Storm Prediction Center today has got a slight risk out for the Carolina coast. See it right in through here, getting up into parts, here into Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, this area. So as the frontal boundary comes sweeping through there, that's where we're going to be most concerned about the chances for some stronger storms later this afternoon. Let's get an eye on the timing of that. We're going to go to the high resolution NAM model. Now this started last night, so you can see here the heavier precipitation that was in place. As we work our way into mid-morning, it will be the storms lining up right right in through this area that I'm going to be concerned about. Ready? So this is early this morning, now working into the middle of the day. So that's when the frontal boundary will be passing through the eastern parts of North Carolina, and we're going to watch for our risk of some stronger storms through midday today. Could get a passing shower late in the afternoon, but notice on the back side of this, a lot of cold air coming in. Tennessee, Kentucky, pushing up against the west-facing slopes of the Appalachian Mountains. I do expect to see snow through the evening and overnight hours right in through this area. I'll show you how much in just a few moments. And as we work our way then into Tuesday morning early, just don't be surprised if we get a scattered cold shower on the back of this as this low just stacks up and slowly moves through parts of Ontario, over these Great Lakes here, and then eventually, once we get into Wednesday, out of the picture. Now, after that, we're going to have a couple of days of drier weather. We're going to wait for the weekend for this next system behind it to possibly come over and add some rain. But I'm going to emphasize the word possibly, and here's why. Okay, switching over to the operational European model. Yeah, it's windy today. Here's the low early this morning. By the time, again, let's just watch this. By the time we get to this afternoon, it's now sitting here over basically DC area. Very, very strong winds. And then we know that the snow's coming in on the backside. Okay, we've talked about that. Let's now get out to this time period, Tuesday night into Wednesday. As we get into Wednesday, high pressure takes over for us, but you notice there's another low developing right here on the Red River. Now that low is going to really struggle to move across the lower Mississippi River Valley. And we're going to get much of the latter half of this week. So basically from Tuesday through Friday, we're going to be seeing high pressure, clear skies, calmer conditions, cool, but calmer conditions. But what we see here is that low that started fizzles as it's just really pushed between two large areas of high atmospheric pressure. But it seems as though we get into Friday morning, Friday afternoon and evening, that boundary could slide through the Carolinas, increasing our precipitation chances. And possibly right as it gets along the coast, there could be an upper level shortwave that helps reinvigorate this on Friday night, getting into Saturday morning, possibly adding some more precipitation. Now, what's tricky about this is that this particular system and the way it evolved really just showed up in the latest model run. And I don't have a ton of confidence in telling you that it's going to evolve in this way throughout the week. But by Saturday morning, we could see some additional precipitation. So again, let's review this. To start off the week, today and early tomorrow, precipitation. We got that coming. Then, much of the day on Tuesday through Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, things are relatively calm. We're going to watch another front come through on Friday. And as you saw here, possibly on Saturday, squeaking through there. Well, Friday night into Saturday, squeaking through, bringing in some additional precipitation. After that, what's interesting is this pattern really starts to favor a lot of development offshore. And I'm going to show you why in just a few moments. So that's into next week. First, total accumulated precipitation through this week. Now, right now, the European model is the most aggressive on bringing in precipitation totals. So what you're seeing here out of all of our modeling suites this morning, this is the heaviest precipitation from all of them. So there's a pretty good chance that with today's precipitation combined with what's coming in on Friday and Saturday, we could be seeing an additional 3/4 of an inch to over 1.5 inches of rainfall with some locally heavier amounts. That's through next Sunday, what we're looking at here. But again, this is the more aggressive of the model forecasts. And I just want to show you the snow. We do expect right around the border, possibly 2 to 4 inches of snow. Okay? So if you're over here watching, get ready for that on up there in the Appalachian Mountains. From there, though, just to show you, there's pretty good support in the ensembles as well for that same snowfall amount. Okay, let's now get into that week 2 pattern. I want to discuss with you something called the Pacific North American pattern. So there's features in the North Atlantic and features in the North Pacific we have to watch, and I'm going to talk to you about both. You ready? First, in the Pacific, we define this PNA, Pacific North American pattern, as having both a positive and a negative phase. And what I want you to see is that over the next 10 days, it's going to really ramp up into a big positive peak right here before dropping back off toward zero, toward normal. Now, we don't look at the long-range forecast of the PNA. It's usually something that we can only predict out about 15 days. But when it's going to up to that positive peak, the jet stream is going to scream across the Pacific right here and then run up into a large ridge into Canada. It's going to swipe back around like this and pick up this trough that's going to come out of like Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and run across this section of the lower 48. Now, that's the positive PNA pattern. Why discuss it? Well, look at this. This is Monday's pattern. Ready? Here's the trough. There's the ridge to the south and the jet stream screaming in between it. Here's the ridge developing over Canada, so the jet stream's got to go around that. But look at the trough setting in through here that's going to move early next week across the southern U.S. But at the same time that that's going on, we're starting to transition away from watching the Pacific after it peaks over to watching the Atlantic. And what's going on between this trough and this ridge forming here in the North Atlantic? Because by day 10, look at this. The jet stream pattern seems to flatten out across the west. See that? But we still see something going on down here in a deep trough just off the coast with a large ridge just to the east of Greenland. Now, if you were to back this whole wave train up, and what I mean by that is send this ridge back west, send this trough back to the west, we would be having a very inclement, possibly snowy and cold early December. That's right, snow, even in the Carolinas, but it's off the coast. So look, the jet stream's going to come screaming in this direction, and then it's going to get picked up right here and then run up into that large ridge. So what you should expect out of that, looking out into the week 2 time period, which takes us all the way out to the 14th of December, is the moisture is going to follow that jet stream. See it? We may actually end up on the drier side of this pattern because of how far to the east the setup is in the North Atlantic. And by the way, we call that the negative phase of the North Atlantic Oscillation. Now, if the negative phase of the NAO shows up in winter and it's back farther to the west, we're going to be in for some wintry mixture of precipitation. And I'm sure we're going to see that a lot this winter, so we'll get to it soon enough. Okay, what does all that mean in terms of temperatures? Well, starting this month, much of the Carolinas had not yet had a frost. This map in gray shows you every location through November the 1st that had a frost. But here we are at the end of the month, and almost all of North Carolina's had a frost, and most of South Carolina has as well. As I showed you at the beginning, we do have freeze warnings out in these areas, and they're going to extend into Florida here very soon as well. Let's take a look at what those minimum temperatures look like. Now, this morning, we're still out ahead of that low that's developing. That's why our overnight lows last night into early this morning were still quite warm. But you can see the cooler conditions on the backside. Notice in the Central Plains, we had teens for our low temperatures early this morning. Tuesday morning is where I want to pause this. On Tuesday morning, right here, see this white line? That white line right into there indicates the freezing line. So if you're on the west side of that, you're going to see temperatures below freezing. And notice on Tuesday, they extend through South Carolina, down into Georgia, and the northern tip of Florida right in through here. Now, as we go from Tuesday into Wednesday, that's going to be our coldest morning. We may have temperatures here in the low 20s in and around Raleigh, right in through this area. So be prepared for that. Freezing temperatures all the way to the coast. This will likely be the event that makes that frost extent map I just showed you all filled in with gray across the Carolinas. Now, after that goes through, so this is Wednesday, going into Thursday, still chilly, but we do see a rebound by Friday, getting into Saturday and Sunday. So that's what's going on. At the end of this, notice how warm things are here in the northern plains. Now, it's still cold. The overnight lows are in the low 20s, but it's warm for them this time of year. And that's the whole positive P&A pattern taking over. Let me show you by looking out here at day 5 through 10. You see the jet stream's going to do this. And that ridge building in that warmth, which I'm drawing over here on the GFS model, is going to keep that part of Canada 15 to 25 degrees above average. It's in both the GFS and the European. Where the differences come in are after the 10th of December. The European tends to hang on to this pattern for a while. But the GFS, look, it's got a much different scenario here for North America. And that's going to be why it's going to be challenging beyond mid-December to give you any clue as to the way the second half of the month is going to shape up. I'm so low confidence right now, I'm even hesitant to share what I think is going to happen. But you do notice that the Carolinas tend to favor more normal temperatures as we get toward the middle of the month. But I'm telling you, I think there's a pretty sizable pattern reset going on there. That pattern reset is not being caused by changes in the polar vortex. Let me show you what I mean. This is an animation over here on the left of the lower stratospheric winds. And what we're watching for here is any sort of disruption to these cooler colors. I see that once we get out here at about the 5th of December, the polar vortex tends to split into two separate features. Do you notice that? But it quickly, watch as I play the rest of this, kind of regains composure and then sets right back up between Greenland, Scandinavia, and Siberia, right into this area. So over here on the right, how do we interpret this? Well, remember, a strong polar vortex keeps all the bitterly cold air to the north. And when we think about the strength, I just want you to remember that this is the average, what I just drew the black line through. And the polar vortex right now is peaking. It's going to weaken temporarily, but it's going to stay right in this vicinity over the next 10 plus days. What we're going to watch for in December, January is if this dips down way like this. Because if that happens, we could see a significant enough disruption of the polar vortex that it connects with what's going on in the troposphere and sends cold air somewhere, possibly along the eastern side of the United States. We'll watch for it. No forecast of it happening right now, but it's something to keep an eye on. So I think a lot of what's going on in our upcoming pattern is actually going to come out of the tropics. We still have a very robust La Nina. The Southern Oscillation Index has been recovering, and the ocean temperatures have been quite steady here, about 1 degree to 1.5 degrees Celsius below average. This La Nina will continue to be in place with strong trade winds through January. Now, when we look at those trade winds, that's where the key, I think, lies in this pattern. You can see when you look at the blues here that this means that extending across the Western Pacific over there toward Indonesia and Australia, there's very strong trade winds. They're being met with a stronger bit of westerly winds in this area. And right in between the two is where the air is going to rise, which is sitting somewhere here over like Indonesia, northern Australia. The thing is about the MJO is that it's just very weakly sitting in phase 3 or phase 4. And it's not really popping out here at high amplitude to really give us a strong signal one way or the other. But I'm going to watch it very carefully because what I see is good rising motion here over phase 3, 4, and 5, sinking motion over the Pacific. And this figure on the right says the same thing. But what I want to use this to discuss is not necessarily North American weather, but South American weather, right in through here. Because as this MJO pattern adjusts, we're going to allow here after this week, so getting into next week, better upper level support for the return of the monsoon here in South America, specifically in Brazil. Now let me show what I'm talking about. The monsoon has been very, very weak and delayed at times. The map over there on the right shows the last 30 days of precipitation anomalies. Well, let me show you this. Honing in on Mato Grosso right there, one of the biggest producing states in South America. I've got two graphics to show you. Over there on the left, the top left, shows you normal precipitation compared to what's in 2020. I've actually shaded in yellow between the two. We are currently sitting at about a 10-inch deficit here in terms of total cumulative precipitation. But I also put 2015 through 2019 on there in different colors and different line shapes. And what I want you to see is a year ago we were sitting way up here, well above normal on precipitation. There have been two time periods, one here and one here, where we had far below normal precipitation. This impacted the first crop of soybeans. Now we think about that for soybean production, but we also think about what this might mean for when the crop gets harvested, the quality of the crop as it's harvested, and then how quickly we're going to be getting in corn and cotton as the safrinha or second crop in this area. These are going to be the things that we're going to be discussing later on to see how it's going to impact the overall performance of all the crops grown in South America. And I believe that right now, the weather part of the market fluctuations are really focusing in on this specifically. So is it changing? Well, this week we're going to continue to keep this region dry. It's drier than normal, okay? To the south, though, in Paraguay, over toward Paraná, which is here, or Rio Grande do Sul, we're expecting better precipitation, also in northern Argentina. But over here toward like Cordoba, getting down into Buenos Aires province, looks to be a little drier. Week 2 stays dry in that area as well, but wetter, in other words, a strengthening of the monsoon farther to the north. Now, here's the big question I'm going to have. Is that going to continue past middle of the month? I don't have a solid answer for you right now. I've got to see more evidence that the MJO is going to move on top of this La Nina before I can make a confident call on that. But I'll bring it up next week, keep you posted on how this weather in South America is seeming to cause some issues with the quality and quantity of the crop that's coming out. We'll stop it there. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.